So let me begin. First of all, welcome to all of you. We're very pleased that so many of you will be joining us this evening to learn more about their Academy's plan for racial equity and justice. Virtually every constituent group in our community is represented among the attendees. We have students, alums, current and past parents, current and past teachers. So we're very, very pleased that so many folks are here this evening. Panelists include administrators, teachers, and trustees. And as we progress through the program, you'll be able to identify various speakers who will be sharing different aspects of the plan with you. For those of you who might wish to consult the plan, as we discuss it now or examine it later, we do invite you to refer to our website at thayer.org. And you can see you'll be able to follow the broad features of the plan. Again, some of you may wish to do so this evening, and some of you may wish to do so later, and some of you may have already reviewed the plan in detail. You can just push on to the next slide for a moment. I just want to offer some preview of the agenda that lies before us. The first part of our agenda will talk about some of the important pillars of the plan, namely its transparency and the accountability that we all embrace to make sure the plan is successful and meaningful. The second part of the program will deal with the execution of the plan, particularly those things that are already underway this year. And toward the very end of the program, I'm sure we'll be able to address some of the questions that might emerge as we discuss it. So for those of you who have already asked questions and channeled them through the DEI email, I'm sure we'll be addressing those over the course of the evening. For those of you who have questions as the program unfurls, then I invite you to use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. And again, we'll do our best to get to at least some of those questions before the evening ends. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So with focus first on transparency and accountability, and especially why this plan is important. I think we all learned in a very, very profound way over the course of this spring and over the passage of the summer that Thayer Academy needs to do better to really live up to its mission. We often tout how Thayer Academy is an environment that is an affirming environment and that we're able to lift up each and every one of our students going forward. But we learned in very, very painful ways over the course of this last half of the year, initially through the vigil that we hosted in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and then through a variety of forums where current students, current parents, and alumni were able to share their stories with us about their experiences at Thayer Academy. Most of those forums were forums for Black families and students and alums. Some of them were more broadly formed to include people of color who are part of our community. But the lesson that we learned very, very clearly is that we really need to do better. Thayer Academy needs to be a place where the aspirations in each and every one of our students can be met and where they feel that this school is a safe school for them. And it really is with that purpose that this plan was developed. The forums that we had provided to us deep insight into some of the challenges that we face and some of the opportunities that lie before us. And we were very pleased that we had the participation of the equity response team made up of administrators, trustees, and Black alumni who helped shape in more detail some of the responses that were required of the school to really live up to our mission. And we're very thankful for the work of the ERT in particular, and very thankful for the sacrifice of time, energy, and the prudent advice that was offered to us by each of the panelists, each of the participants in the ERT who came from our Black alumni group. And actually we're deeply touched that they were willing to continue to work with Thayer Academy in light of the fact that it is clear that Thayer Academy let down many of our students of color and our Black students in particular. And for that, we apologize. For that, we accept responsibility, and we are dedicated to do better as we move ahead. This plan, as I shared, has 5 pillars. Transparency. We want people to understand what the plan is, what we say we're going to do, and when we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. This plan is infused with accountability. We want people to understand that we are accountable for the successful execution of the plan. And the plan also is infused with due consideration for representation, education, and expectations, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But it's, I think, critical at this point for all of our attendees to appreciate that the investment of the Board of Trustees in this plan is deep. The Board of Trustees is, in a sense, forever at their academy. They really are charged with the long-term sustainability of our mission. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce Michael Joe, our chair, who can talk a little bit more about the board's role.
Thanks, Ted, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'll be pretty quick, but on behalf of the trustees, I just want to reiterate the board's commitment to racial equity and justice, and that they are being a more inclusive community. We all need to own this plan individually as trustees and collectively as a board. And the success of implementing and executing on the strategic plan will require the efforts of the entire community, including the board. As people may know, the strategic plan for racial equity and justice was approved by the board in early September. But prior to that, the board had been actively involved in the development of the plan throughout the summer. Multiple board members, including myself, attended all of the important forums that were held with students, alumni, and parents. And several members of the board were members of the emergency response team that provided the recommendations to the board regarding the strategic plan. And from an accountability standpoint, ongoing oversight will rest with the board. I'd also add, in addition to Ted and the current board, Chris Fortunato Thayer's recently announced new head of school starting next July has read, discussed, and fully supports the plan. But there's a lot to be done now, and as with any strategic plan that addresses numerous challenges, certain actions in the plan are already being implemented, as you'll hear about shortly. Some steps have been specifically identified, and the implementation will occur in the coming months, and some will require some additional planning to finalize all the necessary details. But one important aspect of the plan I'd like to focus on is the formation of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee of the board. This is a newly formed committee. It will meet regularly and provide updates at every single board meeting. And Donovan Brown, a trustee and alumni from the class of 2001, has graciously agreed to be the committee's first chair. And with that, I'd like to pass things on to Donovan to provide some additional details about this important committee.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here tonight. As Michael said, my name is Donovan Brown. I've been a trustee of Thayer Academy for about 4 years, and I will be chairing the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Subcommittee. After a series of painful calls and discussions over the summer, where alumni shared very real, raw experiences, we formed an equity response team that was largely responsible for creating our strategic plan. As Michael laid out and Ted also mentioned, there's a strategic plan that covers a number of different areas of the school, including accountability, transparency, representation, and an anti-racist curriculum. This is something that I can say is, obviously near and dear to my heart. I was class of 2001, and this is not the Thayer that I experienced. So I am committed to use my opportunity as a board member to help to make sure that we carry out the strategic plan and we're able to address the issues that our community has so clearly brought to our attention. With that, I'd like to pass it to Jen Welsh, the Director of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Thanks, Donovan. Good evening and welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. As the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, seeing this work move forward is incredibly important to me, and I'm thankful for the community's support of this crucial work as well. Thayer Academy remains committed to providing a safe, welcoming, and inspiring environment for every student. Not only do we celebrate what we have in common, but also our differences that weave us together and create the fabric of this special community. We continue to cultivate and grow a range of programs and initiatives that accentuate the diversity work at Thayer. Every student should be given the love and attention they deserve, no matter their race, age, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, learning style, physical ability, family makeup, or socioeconomic status. Our diversity plan is the overarching umbrella for all diversity initiatives. The strategic plan for racial equity and justice, which we will discuss tonight, highlights an area that needs our increased focus and attention. THAIR has recognized its faults and blind spots and is committed to being a more inclusive and anti-racist institution. This comprehensive plan lays the foundation for THAIR to be better and do better, so that each and every student feels seen, heard, and valued. I am grateful for the tireless efforts from the members of the Equity Response Team, including the 4 alumni not currently on the staff or board that contributed to the development of the plan. Jonathan Culpepper, Jasmine Hicks, Napoleon Larison, and Ashley Ogwadima. Their commitment and dedication to THAIR Academy will leave an everlasting imprint. This work is a school-wide effort and is a shared responsibility, from the head of school to the trustees, faculty and staff, families, students, and alumni. Everyone plays an important role in the success of this plan.
Thank you, Jen. So next phase of our program this evening, I want to talk just very, very briefly about some of the steps that are underway at THAIR Academy to execute this plan. I think we all appreciate that a plan is only as good as its execution. And we are deeply committed to really move forward forcefully, energetically, and meaningfully in the months and years ahead. As we had already shared, the accountability and transparency that runs through the plan is already evident, but we want to highlight some of the aspects of our plan that reinforce our commitment to change at THAIR Academy. And the 3 phases, or the 3 pillars of the plan we want to talk about next, have to do with representation, anti-racism education, and clear cultural expectations for all our students and staff. With respect to the first, representation, I think we all appreciate that THAIR Academy needs to embrace the opportunity to invite a more diverse population amongst our faculty, staff, and our student body. A broader representation in every walk of school life will only make our student culture stronger, and will only empower our students to engage in the broader world, the broader community, in ways that are purposeful and meaningful and positive. In addition to that, the importance of shaping the school culture rests very much on the anti-racism education we need to promote at THAIR Academy. And you'll learn that we've already taken some very significant steps to create opportunities for faculty and staff to understand more clearly the opportunities that lie ahead of us to embrace this very, very diverse world in which we live, and to understand implicit bias in all its forms, and how that those aspects of life can sometimes result in the limitation of opportunities for other people. And last but not least, we'll talk about the cultural expectations of THAIR Academy, which have to be clearly stated. We need our students and our faculty, staff, administrators, all of us need to understand what is expected of us as we function within this culture, and that we need to be held accountable for our actions. So with that said, I'd like to invite John White, who is our Director of Admissions, to talk about the representation through the lens of enrollment. John?
Thank you, Ted. This evening, I'm pleased to share the admissions initiative as an important part of the DEI strategic plan. Our admissions goal this year is very clear: to continue to build a diverse community of color with a commitment to increase our Black student enrollment numbers. This year, THAIR has the highest student of color enrollment in its history. Currently, we have 136 students of color out of a total of 697 students, equaling 19.5%. This 19.5% is up from 11% just 10 years ago. However, Black student enrollment has been flat. This year, THAIR has 40 Black students, or 5.7% of the student body. We acknowledge this lack of increase and are committed to the primary goal of increasing the number of Black families who consider and enroll at THAIR. I'd like to share with you a number of admission strategies already underway to reach our goal. There are 2 major areas: building outreach and securing enrollment. For outreach, here are some of the initiatives which are underway. One, admissions is partnering with their student and parent groups of color to assist with networking, word of mouth, and outreach. These groups we are working with include Omega with Jen Welsh as faculty advisor, ISOCON with Brandon Odom, Project Rise with Jarvis Weiss, the Faculty Diversity Committee with Jen Welsh, a panel of color admissions group with the admissions office. These groups will assist us in expanding outreach. Two, we have assigned each admissions staff member to be responsible for recruiting from the organizations and schools who refer students there. Examples of these organizations are the Stepping Stone Foundation, ABC, Project Rise, Beacon Academy, Project Deep, and many others. Three, we are also connecting with new organizations and groups we have never worked with before. With Brandon Odom's leadership, we are establishing relationships with Jack and Jill, the Divine Nine, the Base, and other networks. Last year, we held a specific student and parent of color event with 24 faculty and students of color. We had over 70 diverse attendees. All agreed it was a wonderful evening, which fostered connections and led to enrollment. We will hold 3 such events this year. Other new changes and initiatives to increase Black student of color enrollment include 5, making the ISEE and the SSAT tests optional. This year, we will make our admissions decisions on transcript of grades, teacher recommendations, interviews, and written applications to make the application process more inclusive. 6, increase the amount of financial aid for accepted Black students. 7, add additional faculty of color to our admissions and financial aid committees. 8, creating additional database in the admissions office to track and follow our applicants of color. 9, assign buddy students and their parents for newly accepted students and parents of color. And 10, reducing Black and student of color attrition through prospective student support programs in each division. We are confident that these initiatives and others yet to come will help us reach our goal of increased student of color and specifically Black student enrollment. I'd like to pass the program along to Hailey Thompson, Upper School Director.
Thank you, John, and welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Similar to having appropriate representation of students of color, it's equally important that our faculty and staff better reflect society in general. And we've been making some changes to our hiring process and training. Already back in January, we began with a full review of the hiring process and enlisted the help of Liza Toulouzin, a diversity consultant, to work with their upper school department heads, who are a critical piece in hiring. The main purpose of the training was to recognize and eliminate implicit bias in any and all phases of the hiring process. Some of the things that we examined included reworking job descriptions to signal our desire for diverse candidates, and really for any candidate who valued DEI work. Avoiding any non-essential criteria that might limit our candidate pool, creating a more unified approach to candidate outreach and follow-up, planning carefully for campus invitations and visits, and ensuring that all candidates who visited campus interviewed with Jen Welsh. We found that the process worked and felt better for all, including candidates. And our intention, of course, is to continue making inroads throughout the next hiring season and to expand our efforts and training to include ongoing faculty support and retention with Liza this year. So we're looking forward to those processes. Across campus, we're also looking to generate a more robust pipeline of candidates of color. In addition to the normal places we post positions like NAIS, which is the National Association of Independent Schools, ASNE, which is the Association of Independent Schools of New England, or the Thayer website, or more traditional hiring firms, we're looking forward to opening news sources for potential candidates, including outreach to historically Black colleges and universities, to our Thayer Academy Black Alumni Association, and even to our parent body. Both divisions, upper school and middle school, plan on expanding our hiring committees to bring a variety of voices to the process and to provide new faculty with more support as they begin their Thayer teaching experience. We are really looking forward to seeing how these initiatives work this year. I'll now pass it over to Jen Welsh, who will talk a little bit about some of the other faculty and staff training that has been occurring.
Thanks, Hailey. Since all faculty and staff work directly with students and families, it is important that together we have shared language, policies, and practices. To that end, providing professional development opportunities to grow and learn is an essential part of living out this strategic plan. This summer, all faculty and staff did their own required summer reading, the book Waking Up White by Debbie Irving. Members of this diversity steering committee held book discussion groups throughout the summer for faculty and staff to process, ask questions, and discuss the book as they read, either in an affinity space or a mixed working group. This provided a space and opportunity to get to know each other on a deeper level as people shared stories and personal reflections. At the start of the school year, Irving presented to the community, sharing the experiences of her own awakening and work around racial injustice. Diversity consultant Lawrence Alexander led a training in both divisions focusing on implicit bias and understanding identity and its impact in the classroom. He also continues to consult with different departments to speak specifically to their areas of work. For example, the admissions staff met with Lawrence and did a deep dive into the enrollment process with a focus on the implicit biases we may bring to the table without even realizing, and how we may be excluding applicants due to these biases. Not only have faculty and staff participated in trainings with Lawrence, but also the Board of Trustees, and in the coming weeks, he will meet with the TAPA board and extend an invitation to all their parents and guardians for a training session as well. Thayer Academy was a lead sponsor in the National Anti-Racist Teach-In Conference held virtually in August. Keynote speakers included Ibram X. Kendi, Austin Channing Brown, Paul Gorski, and Joy DeGrew, just to name a few. This sponsorship afforded the entire Thayer community to participate in this event, and over 70 current students, faculty, staff, families, and alumni were able to attend. Future events include the ASNE Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference, the People of Color Conference, and Student Diversity Leadership Conference. We will also continue to bring in more speakers to contribute to conversations around race and equity. I will now pass it off to Lynette Sumter, Upper School Director of Studies.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thanks for participating tonight. As the Upper School Director of Studies, I work closely with my counterpart in the middle school, Carter Harrison. Together, we chair the academic forum, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. I also teach 9th grade world history, anti-racism and social justice, which you'll also hear a little bit more about, global scholars, and oversee the Global Scholars Program. The academic forum is largely composed of department heads from the upper school and the middle school. As the academic leadership, we are the strategic curricular decision-making group of the school. The focus of our curriculum work is alignment of the curriculum from 5th through 12th grade with strategic priorities that we advance every year, including creating a more expansive approach to diversity within the curriculum across the school. One of the educational goals we are committed to is developing global citizens with strength of character in line with the school's mission. We fully recognize that we must do better with regard to anti-racism education, and particularly with regard to racial injustice and equity. Some highlights of the curricular efforts in the upper school are development over the last 2 years. We've been working on it for the 9th grade world history course, which we rolled out this year. We are currently working on rolling out our new 10th grade world history sequence for next year so that students will have a world history, both 9th grade and 10th grade. Emphasis in our planning was on shifting to a more world, global histories and perspectives approach, and less on Eurocentric approaches. In the 9th grade course, students begin with an investigation of the development and fall of empires across the globe, including, for example, regions in Africa, China, the Americas, to deepen their appreciation for the complexities of each of these societies. They will explore the economic, political, social, and intellectual revolutions that ushered in the modern world to better understand the context of what is happening today. Additionally, this year, all history courses are currently immersed in a unit on systemic racism and the Black Lives Matter movement and other protest movements that preceded. This unit, no doubt, is a result of the desire to currently address this moment in our history directly. In this unit, we investigate the essential question: why did protests for racial justice sweep the nation and the globe in the summer of 2020? By exploring a wide variety of sources, including images, articles, documentary clips, economic data, and art, we work to uncover the root causes of these protests and piece together a more thorough understanding of their historical context. Topics include policing and mass incarceration, housing discrimination and the wealth gap, health disparities and coronavirus, segregation in education, and political disenfranchisement. Students engage in reflection as they seek to answer that essential question. We've also developed a required course for all students called Anti-Racism and Social Justice. The course meets once a week for a semester and provides space to take a deeper look at topics and employs an interdisciplinary approach. Goals include a deeper understanding of the historical roots of racism, a deeper understanding of the current racial landscape, development of an anti-racist mindset, and application of practical anti-racist skills. Topics range from exploring identity, looking into arts and literature, and examining data and statistics. I want you to know that the academic leadership of the school is fully committed and excited for our ongoing work on Thayer's anti-racism educational approach. And thank you all for being here with us tonight. I will now pass this on to Danny Seymour, our middle school history department head. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Seymour, and I'm the head of the middle school history department. Our department has been working hard over the past few years to be more inclusive of all voices in history, recognizing that the perspectives of people of color are oftentimes left out of the historical narrative. This will be even more pressing for us this year and will continue to be a goal of ours going forward. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to share with you the changes we have already made in the middle school history curriculum, and also some of the changes we still plan to make as the year goes on in our efforts to provide an anti-racist education to our kiddos. Firstly, in all middle school grades 5 through 8, the students have took part in, or will shortly be taking part in, lessons providing an introduction to the Black Lives Matter movement as a response to the protests that took place this summer and still continuing today, and also to provide some historical context for the Black Lives Matter movement so that students understand that this movement is a continuation of Black activism and the fight for racial justice in the scope of US history. These lessons were scaffolded to fit the age level of the students and the specific curriculum offered in each grade. For example, in the 7th and 8th grade, the students took part in 2 multi-day lessons. In the first lesson, students learned how the Trayvon Martin ruling gave rise to the term Black Lives Matter, and then we analyzed a variety of graphs and charts that illustrate some of the racial inequalities that the movement is looking to change. Next, the students took part in a lesson from the Choices program from Brown University titled Black Lives Matter, the Killing of George Floyd, and the Long Fight for Racial Justice, where we reviewed a timeline of Black activism in the United States from the 1950s to today in an effort to, 1, identify core themes and recognize patterns across different decades of activism, and 2, consider the accomplishments of civil rights activists and the enduring obstacles to racial equality in the United States today. At specific grade levels, in the 5th grade, we have switched our existing 5th grade curriculum from the study of Rome to the study of the ancient world. This change will allow students to have a more complete narrative of history that is also more inclusive of cultures and civilizations around the world and in multiple continents. In our 7th grade world history course, we will continue to be even less Eurocentric. To that end, we will be dropping content, lessons, and projects on the Vikings in order to spend even more time on West African civilizations, Imperial China, and the rise and spread of Islam later in the year. The students will also take part in a lesson using content from A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn on Christopher Columbus as we approach Columbus Day, which is coming up. Further, we will continue to add a more diverse list of options for our various projects and research papers throughout the year to be sure to include more women and people of color for students' choices. And also, I will be looking to integrate content from the book A People's History of the World by Chris Harmon throughout the course of the year in that 7th grade course as well. In our 8th grade U.S. History and Civics course, we will continue to look to add lessons and activities from organizations that teach those unheard voices in history. Some of these organizations include Facing History in Ourselves, the Zinn Education Project, the Choices Program out of Brown University, and others. Further, we will be adding supplementary content and readings from books such as A Different Mirror, A History of Multicultural America by Ronald Takaki, People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, as well as Lies My Teacher Told Me by James Lowen. We have used these sources before and have been particularly useful when we teach the topic of slavery. This year, we'll also be looking to add material from the book Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Jason Reynolds and Ibram Kendi throughout the year. We'll also be enhancing existing lessons and adding additional lessons covering aspects of African-American history throughout the year, including a lesson comparing the 1829 David Walker's An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, comparing it to Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, where we will contemplate whether or not our government today protects the idea that all men are created equal. We'll also do an activity where we analyze a variety of sources, both modern and primary, on Nat Turner and his rebellion, where students will learn that Nat Turner has been depicted differently throughout time and contemplate which depiction should be trusted. Additionally, the students will learn that Nat Turner's rebellion was only one example of a multitude of uprisings that those held in slavery took part in over the course of early U.S. history. I want to emphasize that these are examples of some recent changes. I joined the community as a department chair in the fall of 2017, and I'm committed to working to build an anti-racist history courses here in the middle school. As the year goes on, our department will continue to look for other ways in which we can continue to do so. Thank you all so very much for your time, and I'd now like to introduce my friend, Brandon Odom, Assistant Dean of Students in the Upper School, to talk about school cultural expectations.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. And thank you all for tuning in this evening. I'll be speaking to our school-wide cultural expectations for our community. First and foremost, it is with the utmost focus and importance that DARE promotes and creates a culture that is healthy, safe, inclusive for all of its students. As has been stated earlier, this past spring and summer, it was made plainly evident following our various forums with our Black students, families, and alumni that we have fallen short of following through on our commitment to doing just that. Simply put, we want all of the school cultural expectations to be clear and concise, for accountability to be held for everyone who represents our community, and for discipline to be just. The expectation is that every student should expect respect. All community members are to be held accountable for upholding standards of creating an anti-racist community. And when those standards are not upheld or disregarded, appropriate action and discipline must follow. Derogatory language and hate speech defined as speech, writing, or nonverbal communication that attacks, threatens, or insults a person or group on the basis of national origin, ethnicity, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability has no place in our community. Our institutional policy related to anti-discrimination includes the use of derogatory language. Derogatory language is also addressed in the tiered consequences in the handbook, which Mr. Thompson has already communicated to the entire school during our Monday morning meeting. Additionally, our policies regarding derogatory language are being more fully developed this fall, and we'll be seeking student, parent, and guardian feedback. Most importantly, our discrimination incident reporting will be channeled through our newly formed Anti-Discrimination Committee. This committee, comprised of the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and faculty and staff of color, will be charged with reporting cases to myself and Dean Gately, who will take the appropriate next steps. To this end, our goal is for this format to include for our students to feel empowered to stand up for what is right and redirect or report discriminatory, uncivil, and inappropriate behavior. As of last year, ISOCON, Thayer's Black Student Union, an affinity space for students who identify as Black, was formed to uplift, enlighten, and educate not only Thayer's Black community, but our entire community at large. Through safe affinity spaces like ISOCON and building out anti-racist curriculum and instruction, we are creating platforms for productive dialogue around race and making strides towards producing positive school culture and climate. This afternoon, I had the fortunate pleasure of sitting in on an anti-racism class taught by Mr. Dunn. I was comforted how actively engaged students were with the material and their willingness to lean in to the discussion. Shout out to those students if they're on the call, and many others who are on board with being the change they want to see in their community. And with that, I'll hand it over to Galen Heyman, our middle school director.
Thanks, Brandon. I'm delighted to be here tonight as the newest member of the Thayer Academy community, and just feel such gratitude for the work we've done together this summer, and to hear all of it come together on this call. I want to just say a word about what you have seen in the strategic plan for racial equity and justice. We feel as a community it is really important to note that race and ethnicity exists in our lives and are part of the rich mix that makes communities interesting, vibrant, and informed. To that end, part of our cultural work is creating opportunities for community members to understand DEI and to have optional spaces where they are surrounded by people who share their racial identity. As a whole school, we broke into affinity groups by race for our summer reading discussion as faculty, as we explored Waking Up White. In the middle school, we've already held a social gathering for faculty of color, and upper school is in the planning stages for an upper school faculty of color gathering as well. By mid-year, we hope to have a school-wide faculty and staff of color gathering. We know that this can help with the retention process, as you heard Hailey speak about, that we've been focused on this year and this summer. We will also be hosting affinity groups by race and other identities in the middle school for students, expanding on our lunch bunches of the past. And we plan to begin this in the upper school as well. In the middle school, students have the option of joining Omega as an elective to explore and learn about identity, their own and that of others. In the upper school, we have a similar Omega as a club option for all students. In the middle school this year, we began with a faculty and student-made skit through something we call TATV that explained equity using two students who had computers and lost power, needed a power cord from the librarian, but were in different locations, thus different distances from the plug. We followed this with an all middle school video with advisory conversations about equity. These are just some of the examples that have already begun in our school in the last 6 weeks as we work together to continue to create a culture of welcome and warmth and safety for all of our students here at Thayer Academy. I'd like to turn it back over to our head of school, Ted Kaskoris, as we enter our question and answer period.
Thank you, Galen. So there are a few questions we can address at this point, and maybe more before we finish the evening. I know one fundamental question that some people may ask is, why will this be different? There have been, in not only the school's history, but in our nation's history, there have been moments before where it seemed as if there was a reckoning that was before us and an exquisite opportunity to address the imbalances that exist in our society. And I think it is a fair statement to make that as a nation, we have work to do and that we have not always addressed effectively and in depth some of the challenges we face to really promote true equity and justice within our society. And the same, of course, is true at Thayer Academy. I know I feel personally and professionally haunted by the things that I did not do better in my years as head of the school at Thayer Academy. I know other people share that same perspective. I believe we are in a sincere moment in our school's history where we are acknowledging our failings of the past, and we are deeply committed to doing better. Part of the plan includes, as we have noted before, accountability and transparency. And we will be conducting a climate survey at the end of the school year to assess in a more objective fashion the status of the experiences of our various students in our school culture. We will be sharing on an annual basis with our community, both our current community and our alumni community and past parent community, the progress we have made towards the goals that we have announced. And I'm sure we will continue to refine as the year progresses instruments that we can employ to measure progress, because it is important to take seriously the commitment to move forward productively in each of the areas that we've identified. Now, I know there's a question about admission, which I'm going to paraphrase for John White's benefit, but John, one of the questions that has been raised are there ways in which the admissions office can help assist folks who are applying to Thayer Academy so that their application more fully represents their positive attributes and virtues as a prospective student to Thayer Academy?
Absolutely, without question. I would encourage them to contact us at any point along the way, and we're happy to have a preliminary sit down. If this is a family who has applied before, we'd certainly have an application that may have been waitlisted in the past and so forth. We're certainly happy. I'm happy to go over that application and make recommendations and suggestions in various areas that can be strengthened, for a reapplication process. So once again, in the admissions office, I would say we're here to work with families really at any point along the process and so forth, from the very beginning to questions along the way to suggestions for strengthening their application. And so just have them call me, reach out to any of us, any of the admissions team. We're happy to help.
Thank you, John. And Lynette, from the kind of curricular lens, one question is actually raising a very interesting point about, in a sense, normalizing the fact that we live in a diverse culture with many different perspectives, and not trying to, and really guarding against trying to present authors of color, great figures in history of color as anomalies, but rather as part of the grand sweep of change that exists within every cultural environment. And also, how do we make sure we're truly promoting a diversity of opinion in our classes? That I take from the question that making sure that we're not being overly ideological, that really it is an opportunity for people to really garner an in-depth understanding, which is, as you well know, is only achieved through discussion.
Sure. I just want to make sure that I hear your question precisely.
You can also see the question. I've copied it for you if you want to look at the Q&A. So
let me just take a look at it. I'll take the first one on first. Okay. Let's see here. Is this the one where, in terms of the curriculum, in incorporating multicultural education in all of the courses? Okay. Yes, I take the point about the piece about making BIPOC voices seem as if they are an anomaly, and of course BIPOC voices, and I'm just using the language of the question, have been integral in every aspect of life. And so I don't think that we want to have a curriculum that says, and by the way, here are some people to highlight, but to really understand the infusion of what has been historically, particularly I'm thinking about the US in this moment, has been a very multicultural, contributive community to our way of life. And at the same time, recognizing that we also have, and it's not just there, it's a historical legacy of our country's educational system in terms of I'll speak to the history piece, but my background is also in psychology and religion, that there has been more of a highlighting of other diverse voices. And I think there needs to be much more of an emphasis on the integral nature of these voices, because oftentimes students later on in their career, certainly at the college level, realize that they had never heard of, name the person in your comment about Toni Morrison or someone else, had not read The Bluest Eye before, even though it was in the 80s and so forth. I had not read it until I was in college. And so I think there's a way in which we can infuse more diverse voices, and not as an anomaly or as a sort of like, oh, and by the way, here are these off the side voices, but to really inspire a more integrated understanding of our interconnectedness as part of our nation's history. I hope that answers your question. I'm not entirely sure that it does, but you should feel free to give me a call and to and continue our conversation on that front.
Great, thank you very much, Lynette. There's also a question about the, I think there's an interest in additional detail about the disciplinary process, and Brandon, you might talk in more detail about how the process of reporting actually does work. There is reference to as well that have we, as some of you know, there were posts on Black Ed There, which indicated instances where faculty were pointed as not being appropriately sensitive and sometimes blatantly insensitive to people. In every instance when a faculty member has been named, I do want to assure people that there have been discussions that have been taking place, and those discussions have been appropriate. And in every instance for those faculty who are still with us, in those places where they saw that they had fallen short and they completely acknowledged it, felt deeply disappointed in themselves, and understand clearly that the path forward has to be better. And that's part of what Jen Welsh has reinforced in the education for faculty at the beginning of the year. One of the reasons why we developed the program for faculty at the beginning of the year with respect to anti-bias training was to really deal whole cloth with the possibility that any faculty and staff member or administrator might fall short, and they need to have a better appreciation of the highest standards and expectations for them. But with that said, Brandon, you might talk in a little bit more detail about the process.
Absolutely. So one of the things that was apparent and came out of the forums that we had was that students didn't feel they had the proper, or they felt comfortable with the proper channels to voice their concerns with certain incidences that had arisen on campus. And one of the things that we wanted to shore up as we looked at and heard from the various stories was forming an anti-discrimination committee and forming a process by which students can funnel those concerns in a safe way to a committee that would actually address the concerns that our students had. So with the formation of this anti-discrimination committee, we are encouraging, publicizing for all students as incidences arise, that they go through these channels that will then go to myself and Dean Gately for further review. And we will conduct investigation and proper discipline if need be. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Brandon. There's another question. It's really through the lens of enrollment, and it has to do with we have made plain that it's in the interests of our school and our school culture to bring more Black students on board and to increase their numbers. And although not all Black students by any means require financial aid, it is understood that financial aid is a mechanism that promotes all sorts of diversity at schools and at their academy. And one question has to do with, I think it's really, it's more directed to Michael Joe and the Board of Trustees, but what is the nature of the school's financial commitment to support growing diversity at their academy?
Clearly it's, I would say it is an important initiative of the board. It's something as it goes into, as we discussed earlier on, in terms of the bucket of things that are still in kind of the planning stages, specifically around enrollment and working with John on a specific plan and how that ties into financial aid. And so all of that kind of, again, as part of the commitment of the board in terms of that, in terms of the specifics around sort of financial aid and how that ties into the overall sort of model and financial sustainability of the school.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. There's a question that really is I think really underscores the role parents play in helping students understand what their expectations are as a human being, walking through the opportunities that society provides for support of one another and advancement. And so the question really is pointed towards what is the school doing to promote deeper parent education and parent participation and parent support for these plans, because I think we all appreciate that is necessary. And that process has already begun. We're in discussions with Thayer Academy Parents Association about a variety of different educational programs where we can bring speakers to campus to talk to parents about some of these very same perspectives that we're offering to faculty and students. And Jen Welsh is our director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, has been at the forefront in suggesting speakers to the parents. And we're also working with TAPA to develop more engagement with the parent community as we articulate more fully some of the school policies regarding anti-racism within our school culture, to develop policies that are even more explicit regarding derogatory language, and to make parents and students more deeply aware of the consequences for falling short in that area. We appreciate, Brandon referred to this, that this really is, in addition to the steps that we've already taken to articulate some of these policies in our handbook, we appreciate as well that we really need to refine them even more deeply before the calendar year ends, and we'll be engaging the parent community on that score. There's a question about representation as it applies to the board. A more diverse board and other areas of school leadership. And Michael, I'll ask you to address that question as well.
Sure. I mean, I would start by saying that's always something that's under consideration by the board when you look at the overall makeup of the trustees in terms of making sure that the relevant constituencies of the community are well represented. There's a governance committee on the board, which is represented by across and has diversity representation on it as makeup of the trustees. We meet quarterly and evaluate sort of who's coming on the board and where we have opportunities, and that's very much sort of factored in. But that's always something that's been done. And I think we had a committee a meeting as early as recently as this week, where we specifically discussed that and making sure that we have an increase in the number of kind of the pipeline of potential diversity candidates to be considered for the board. So it's something we've always done, and I think that's been highlighted and will continue to be.
Okay, thank you. There's a question about is this being recorded, and yes, it is. And will it be accessible on Thayer Academy's website? And yes, it will. And I'll rely on Communications Department to provide notice about where people could find the recording, but it definitely will be posted for the benefit of those who were not able to be here this evening. All right, I think we've covered most of the questions. Anything which we haven't covered in adequate detail, we'll find a way of addressing that response, our responses on the website. And Galen, I think there's a question that you can answer.
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Julie, for the question. It's actually a question that got raised in our professional development for all teachers in the middle school. We are well aware that our numbers of students of color are not as high as we would like them to be, and that often does mean that a student of color might be 1 or 2 or 3 in a class, particularly our Black students. And it's something that I certainly heard on the calls from alumni this year, this summer. How can we do better? It's something we thought about as we place students this year and are continuing to think about moving forward. But the question that arose in our professional development was specifically this from our teacher. I have only 1 student, or I have 2 Black students in my class. How do I ensure that they feel safe and comfortable, and that the other students are not turning heads or asking questions or expecting that they will have the answers, or side glancing to see how they're responding to the curriculum. And one of the things Lawrence Alexander shared with the whole group was just how important it is for us as teachers to make sure that there are expectations of cultural norms in classrooms when we're teaching. It's one of the things that in the 8th grade civics curriculum, Danny Seymour and Dan Leach really talk about at the outset, is how we talk to one another and what we do in those conversations. And additionally, and that's about focusing on an individual's own learning. And one of the things we also did was, because we knew these conversations were happening right now at the beginning of the year due to the timing of when things exploded in our country last spring, we wanted to make sure that we also had an opportunity as soon as possible for students of color in the middle school to get together with faculty of color to just check in and to get to know one another. So we had a lunch bunch last week, and all middle school parents will be getting a note from myself and Jen and Matt and Richie tomorrow, actually, about all of the DEI initiatives in the middle school that are happening. So our hope is that by building and continuing to build with our student population, our hope is that all students, not just the faculty, but that our students and our families will join us in this anti-racism work, because it's what we believe in, and we hope will inspire others to join us in this work.
Thank you, Galen. So if you, as you can see on the slide, if you have any follow-up questions, or if you feel like one of your questions was not adequately addressed, please contact us through DEI. I want to say in closing that not only is any plan as good as its execution, but any plan that is static, that is frozen in time, is sure to fail. It's not going to really respond. And so, we view this plan as organic. We know that it's going to evolve over time. Part of the evolution of a successful plan is its transparency, is the accountability, and is the ongoing discussion with those who are deeply impacted by the results of the purposes of the plan. As I had shared before, the school is committed at least once a year to have sessions where we talk about the plan and to share with folks our progress. The school is deeply committed to developing a means of measuring our progress, sharing the means that we are employing, and being transparent with our community in those areas where we are moving forward productively, and to also identify those areas where we need to double down and make more successful our efforts. The underlying theme of this plan obviously is to promote change in our school culture, change which really allows their academy to truly deliver its mission to each and every one of our students. So with that, I'm deeply appreciative for your attendance, and I will look forward to your continued candid support and guidance as we move forward to help this school live up to this mission. So thank you very, very kindly.